When I was 52 years old, a friend of mine moved permanently to the Philippines. He'd been travelling there for many years, he had a wife from there, and he said that the Philippines was the best country he'd ever been to. While the Philippines was always part of our conversations when we met up together, I was just usually going along with it because it didn't really interest me. I never considered that it would be part of my life because that was him. But when he was there, he kept going on about how fantastic it was. He could have such a better life there, he kept saying. So I decided that I might as well do a little bit of research just to see what all this was about. It started simply just doing basic Googling. The Philippines, where it was on the map, what was the capital city, just the basics, getting to know a bit more about it. I then start reading a lot more articles about the craziness of Manila, how wonderful the beaches are on the islands. And I did start to think that maybe there's something in it after all. My friend was the same age as I was, and when he retired, he was going for good. He never planned to return. He never needed to work again either, and although we had very similar jobs and salaries through our lives, I was nowhere near retirement. We probably had similar life savings. At least I'm thinking, unless he hit something big, which he didn't tell me about. It's very possible. But he was able to have a life in the Philippines right now, as opposed to me having to wait another 15 years at home in the States. I started to feel like I needed to explore this a lot more. Back then, there were no YouTube videos like they are today. But not talking too long ago, maybe 10 years. And I was more drawn to reading about people's experiences and the things they did. I hadn't yet come to a decision to go to the Philippines, but one decision I would make brought me a lot closer to that possibility, far sooner than I expected. One day, I just decided to join a dating site. I didn't do much dating at home. I had a few serious relationships in my life, but never marriage, and I signed up for a premium package on this site. It was about $2 a month, so I didn't really care about that. And before long, I'm getting messages from girls out there in the Philippines without me even having to reach out first. That was a very unique experience. I was used to be the one who had to make the first move and being rejected 99.9% of the time. But here I was, being able to reject 99.9% of the girls that reached out to me, because there always seemed to be somebody that bit more beautiful or that bit more perfect. And that gave me a sense of power in a way, but also pride that I felt like I was wanted and respected in a way like I never felt before. I was really drawn to one girl early on. The way my friend talked about it was in the Philippines, it's normal for relationships when the man is a lot older than the girl, and I thought that was set up like that on purpose, and that was the case all over the Philippines. And while I would never have even considered doing that at home, even if it was a possibility, which it most definitely wasn't for me, I did think that in the Philippines it was acceptable, so the fact that she was 23 didn't even concern me. I guess I was just brainwashed into thinking that that was normal and acceptable. She approached me first, her pictures were stunning. She was just an incredibly beautiful girl with a great smile and what seemed to be a desire to meet someone like me. I was hooked straight away. Moved away from the dating site to speak to her on messages, and I cancelled the subscription. I didn't need it. I did think I could sign up again if needs be, but I was happy with what was happening with her, and it seemed to get serious quick. We started messaging each other more and more, all the time. It wasn't just once a day either. Sometimes she would message me in the morning before I left for work, then again during my lunch break, and almost always at night before I went to bed. I have to admit that I liked it a lot. But I was also thinking to myself whether I was actually letting myself get too pulled into this a bit quickly. Whether I was enjoying it a little bit too much for my own good. I knew where things like this could end up, and I knew that if I wasn't careful, then I could end up being the one who looked stupid. She brought it up herself one day that maybe we should start speaking on the phone instead of messages. I was excited and I agreed almost immediately, because as much as I liked the messages, I wanted to hear her voice. I wanted to know what she actually sounded like. The first calls were pretty short, but it was amazing to think that I was actually speaking to this girl. 10 or 20 minutes we'd speak and talk about all kinds of different things. It felt a lot different from messages. I have to say it felt real in a way that sending a message never could. Because when you've actually heard someone's voice, then you know for certain that this person on the other end is real. It gave me a sense of comfort to know that she was there, picking up and talking to me. I mentioned this to my friend who had all this experience in the Philippines, and he just told me the same thing over and over again. Just be very careful and keep it simple. He told me there are scams everywhere and plenty of things that can go wrong. He was very clear and said, never send money and don't make any promises. He just kept saying that, so that's what I thought. He did say if you're still interested, go there and see her in person first before doing anything serious, and that advice did stick with me. I knew he was right, and I repeated it to myself more than once. The more we talked, the more I did want to go. So after weeks of this and building what felt like a really strong connection, I started looking at flights. I kept looking for days and thinking about should I go or shouldn't I, the dates and the prices, and one day I just went ahead and booked. Why not, I thought. I pressed the button and that was it. I couldn't go back and change my mind. When I told her, she sounded really excited. She said she couldn't wait to meet me. She promised she would be waiting with a sign at the airport with my name on it. And that made me feel good, yet a little nervous at the same time. Good because it felt like the real first step. Nervous because I kept asking myself, is this stupid? Am I going to make a complete fool of myself? But by the time I had my ticket, the bags were ready to go, it was too late to back out. When I landed and finally made my way through the immigration line, I was nervous in a way I can't properly explain. I'd been nervous before I left and on the plane, but this was different. This was nervous that was like, was she even going to be there? I was only a few seconds away from finding out the truth, so I picked up my bag and walked out into the arrivals area, and I started scanning for my name straight away. I kept looking left and right, and I didn't see it at first, and for a second I thought maybe she had changed her mind, or maybe this was a moment I would realise I'd made a mistake that everyone had warned me about. Then I saw it. A piece of rough cardboard with my full name written in block capitals, and she was holding it up with both hands. I remember my legs slowing down a bit and me wanting to think, what's going on? Because it was her, but it wasn't her. I'd been speaking to her and seeing pictures, I recognised the eyes, the smile, but everything else was older, much older. The pictures I'd been sent were not from last year or even 5 years ago. They seemed to be from another lifetime altogether. I felt my stomach drop, and for a moment I honestly didn't know what to do. I just stood there with the bag and thinking, do I just walk away? She smiled at me and looked really nervous, and then she said my name. Her voice shook slightly as if she knew what she did was silly, and I walked over because what else was I supposed to do? I wasn't going to turn around in front of 100 people and walk back inside. She told me straight away that she was really sorry. She wasn't 23, she was 38, and she said she knew she should have told me, but she was scared that I would stop talking to her. I didn't know what to say. I did feel like I'd been hit in the chest because I'd come all this way for a lie. But I also thought to myself that I did know something was off, even though I didn't really. I'd ignored small things now and then, and I didn't know. She just told me if I wanted to leave, she'd understand. She said it in a quiet way, like she'd already prepared for it. And I thought about it for a second. I thought about picking up my bag and walking past her, getting a taxi into the city on my own, but I didn't. I thought that we should at least sit down and talk. So we walked out together, and as much as I wanted to be angry, I also wanted to know why she'd done it. Because that's how my mind works. I can't just stop at the surface. I need to know what someone thinks in order for them to make the decisions that we were making. We stayed in Manila for a few days because that was the plan I'd already made. I'd booked the hotel before I even left home, so there wasn't really a question of what to do next. And even though part of me wanted to cut it short and fly back, I didn't. I told myself I had to see how it felt face to face, when the shock had worn down a little. The hotel was simple, and I was glad it was because I didn't want anything fancy that would distract me from what was actually happening. We walked around a bit, she showed me some places, and we ate in a couple of spots that she said were good. But the whole time I kept looking at her and trying to put together the person from the pictures with the person I was sitting across from. It didn't add up. At the same time, I couldn't ignore that she was there. She had turned up, she was sitting across from me, and she was talking openly. One night over dinner, she told me more about her family. She told me on the site that she had 1 child, but now she told me she actually had 4. She told me their names as well, and that made it too real, and their ages, schools that they went to. She told me which one was shy and which one gave her the most trouble, and I just had to sit there and listen. Every time she said something, I did feel like two things at once in a way. Disappointed because it was another lie, yet calm in a way because at least she was saying it now and not hiding it anymore. I asked about the fathers. She just said two were completely gone. One sent something sometimes and one turned up when it suited him. 3 fathers in all. She said none of them would ever be my problem. Apparently, that was her responsibility, not mine. She said she didn't want me to think I had to have any problems with her family. And I really did want to believe her. I mean, I really did. Because it would have been so easy to just get up and leave. I don't know why I didn't. I stayed. I stayed because the truth is I liked the way she spoke to me. She never shouted or demanded anything, and she just talked. I thought maybe if I could get past the way that she looked and how she'd lied, then we could have something real here. I did tell myself I wasn't going to make any decisions while I was still in the Philippines. I would have to go back home and think clearly with a bit of distance. That was the rule I set for myself, and I held it. Even as we walked hand in hand, it felt strange, but it did start to feel good. On the last night before I was due to fly home, I kept saying to myself, don't decide now, see how you feel when you're home, and look at this from the outside. Back in the States, we kept the calls going. It was something that I looked forward to every day. The time difference meant she would message me when I was on my way to work, just a bit, and we'd speak properly when I got home in the evening. It turned into a pattern that became regular, and I was no longer living by myself, it felt, even though she wasn't living with me. She'd tell me stories about her kids, what they were doing, the weather, what she'd cooked, all basic things that normal couples talk about. Doesn't sound important when you list them now, but when you're living it, it does make a difference. They make you feel like you're part of someone's life, and I like that. I liked it maybe too much, because I also started to feel a stronger pull towards her. I told myself all the time, don't make promises, and I repeated that. Don't send money, don't promise anything, just keep talking and see. For the most part, I did stick to it. But one time she told me about a school fee that was due, even the exact amount and the date, and she just didn't ask really. She just kept talking about it, so I decided to cover it. It wasn't because it was asked for, it was because it was just normal, I thought, and I could manage it. It wasn't a lot of money either. It also wasn't followed by a bigger request, so that was good. It just came and that was it, I did it. I felt better knowing I helped. When I told my friend about it, he shook his head and told me that I was breaking a rule already. But I told him it didn't feel like that because it felt natural, and I thought if I kept it small and controlled, then it would be fine. I think we carried on like that for, 3 months straight, every day, no highs, no lows, just the same talking that we did all the time. And that sort of made me convinced that maybe this wasn't just another scam. Maybe this was something I could actually get to know and believe in and trust. I thought about what my life looked like if I stayed in the States and kept working for another 15 years. And I thought about what it could look like if I just went there and tried. And that thought kept coming back to me stronger every time. I didn't say it out loud at first because I knew as soon as I said it, that would be more difficult to actually convince myself not to. Or to, depending on the situation and feelings I felt at the time. I was going to make the move though, that was it. It was only a matter of when. Once I had made the decision in my head that I was going to move there, that's when things started to move a lot quicker. I gave myself a date, told myself once I'd picked that date, there was no going back. I started working backwards from it. I sold my car, which was the first big step, because once the car was gone, I couldn't just slide back into the same life. Then I started selling furniture and I boxed up things that I thought I wouldn't be able to need and gave them away. I closed accounts I didn't need anymore and spoke to the bank about access and limits because I didn't want to have any problems when I was there with cash. I put all my savings into one place so I could see a number. I didn't want to trick myself into thinking I had more than I did. I think it makes sense to keep everything in one place, and when it came to the number, it was around 250,000 US. It wasn't like it was a huge fortune, but it was the result of years of work that I'd done. I put money away any time I could, and I kept having to tell myself that if I was careful, it was more than enough to be able to build a decent life. I didn't make an announcement that I was going. I only told 2 people close to me. I didn't want a lot of noise, didn't want anyone questioning what I was doing. I booked a one-way flight because I knew if I bought a return, I might be tempted to use it. I didn't want that temptation, and when I arrived, she met me at the airport like she said she would. This time, no surprise. I knew she wasn't 23 and I knew she had 4 kids, but I walked out of the airport with my bag and there she was. I told myself I was starting fresh right here. New life, new start, new beginning. The plan I'd written for myself, though, was very clear. Stay in the city for a while, get my bearings, and look at options later. Never rush into any big commitments. Those were the rules I'd set, and I repeated them to myself all the time. I would not break my rules. I arrived in the Philippines with $250,000 in savings. That was the number I thought. That was what I kept telling myself over and over again was enough. Like I said, it was not a fortune, but it was enough to build something that I thought would be maintainable. I'd worked for years to build it, and I knew how easily it could be gone if I made the wrong moves. So I was determined to just stretch it out as far as I could. The first month was about settling in, and I wanted to keep everything as basic as possible. We rented a small condo in Manila because that was easier for me as a foreigner starting out. Again, that was a great, clean place, close enough to the shops. So everything felt like a normal life. Her kids were with her parents up in the village where she was from in northern Luzon, and we hadn't even been to see them yet. But in terms of living, I paid rent, utilities, bought food in local markets, and I actually made a note of every single peso I spent. I wanted to be honest with myself and not lie. One weekend, we decided to go and visit her family. This was the first time I would be seeing them. I had spoken to them on the phone, and it was actually during one of those calls that her uncle had the idea of land coming up. He said there was space behind his place in the province, and we could use that if we wanted to. He didn't say we could own it, or buy it, or give him any money for it, but he just said we could use it. And the way he said it made it sound like it was not a big deal at all. For me, though, I knew it was a big deal, because the idea of moving out of Manila to build something in a province was the kind of step that you can't sort of change after you've done it. I remember telling her straight away that I knew what the law was. I knew I couldn't own anything in my own name, and she actually agreed. But she also said that having a place up there near the family would be a lot better for her kids and cheaper for us in the long run. I didn't answer her or say anything. I just said I needed to think about it. I did tell her and her uncle that if I ever considered it, then it would need to be a very slow-moving process. I didn't want anything that could catch me out, and I kept saying that. I would not hand over any big money in one go. I thought I was being smart in that moment. I really wanted to believe that as well, that I could handle this, and I knew what was going on inside my head, but the problem was it was like the seed had been planted, and Manila always felt like it was a temporary sort of place, and perhaps this was going to be something different. After a month in Manila, I'd started to enjoy myself. I was one of the few people who actually really loved the local food. I liked how easy it was there, and I also liked the way that the days felt different than how they did when I was at home. I didn't plan or rush into anything, and that was good for me. So when she suggested that we actually go for the visit, this was what we were going to do. I just thought it was going to be a short trip. I didn't expect it to be anything more, and I had no intention of agreeing to anything serious. It was a long ride, and I just sat there on the bus, talking to myself in my head like you do, saying that, show respect, say thank you for the offer, and just say you'll think about it. When we got there, our uncle showed us the back of the place and the land. It wasn't anything special. I had grand visions and pictures of what it was going to be like. It was just open ground with a few uneven patches. But as I just stood there, I did start to picture what it might be like if a house was there. I thought about how quiet it was compared to Manila, how there would be space for her kids, and that let me feel that perhaps I should do this. She stood next to me, smiling and talking with her uncle about where the kitchen might go and things like that before I'd even made a commitment, and I just found myself nodding along. Even though an hour earlier, I would have said no. But the excitement crept up on me because I liked the idea of having somewhere that felt like I was a bit more settled. I told myself that if it was done carefully, not rushed, then it could be good. We were then starting talking about the costs, and the number came out to $75,000. A proper house, bedrooms, bathrooms, everyone could live there. And I found myself just agreeing. I don't know why I did, but it just felt right in that moment. That's the thing. In the moment, it felt so good to say yes, and that feeling sort of pushed me through all the uncertainty and doubt. It felt like we were moving forwards. It wasn't until later and looked back and I realised how stupid it was. I'd only been in the country for barely over a month, and that was it. I'd agreed to tie up nearly a third of my savings in a house that I couldn't even own. At the time, though, none of that mattered. It felt good. It felt like I was finally doing something bold instead of cautious, and I had to convince myself it was the right choice. While the house was being built and it was moving forward, we stayed in a cheap basic hotel in town about 15 minutes away from the site. Every morning we'd take the tricycle out and check on the progress and come back later in the day. It did feel good at first because there was a sense that something was being achieved. I could see the walls going up, starting to take shape, and it gave me a feeling like I was building a future. In those early weeks, I had to convince myself that I'd made the right call. I liked the way the neighbours from the barangay came to look at me and say good morning. I liked how people always seemed interested in what was happening, and even though I knew it was costing me a lot, I felt proud to be the one making it happen. But it was during this time that her uncle brought me a problem that changed everything. He told me the family had debt that they couldn't clear and that the interest was piling up. He said if it wasn't taken care of, they could lose what little they had. I asked him how much, expecting a very small number, and when he said nearly $50,000, I almost laughed because I thought I'd misheard. But then he showed me the papers and the amount was there, black and white, $50,000, well, in pesos of course. It was owed to a local lender, and the interest rates were huge and it was climbing every month. I told him straight away it wasn't my problem, but he said it could be treated as a loan and that his son, who was working in Manila, would make the repayments on my behalf. He said he was already sending home about $300 a month, so that could go to me instead. He said that later on, once he got a better job, the money would go up more. Later on that day, I found myself sitting in the hotel room and thinking back and forth in my head as to what to do. The thing was, I knew it was madness, but I also thought about it would mean great things to the family. How I would be able to help them and how bad it would be if they lost their place while I was building right next door. So I gave in, and I gave them the full $50,000 and told myself it was just a loan and that the repayments could come in month by month. And that was the bridge until the family caught up. I convinced myself that I was helping them while keeping my own position safe, not realizing how much damage I'd already done to my savings so early on. When the house was finally finished and we moved in, it felt like a great milestone. For the first time since arriving in the Philippines, I wasn't living out of a bag or in a small hotel room or a small condo. I had a place I could walk into and say was mine, even though on paper it never was. I remember standing outside and looking at it, and I felt proud and excited because I couldn't believe it actually had it done. It was great too, bigger than I expected, and it gave me a real sense of achievement. People in the barangay would walk past and say it looked impressive, and that only added to the feeling that I'd made the right choice. I thought maybe this was the point where things would settle down, but as soon as we moved in, the kids came too, all 4 of them. They'd been living with her family in the village while we stayed in the hotel, and while the house was being built. I'd only seen them in passing on visits for short periods of time, but living with them full time was completely different. The house was noisy from morning to night. The television was always on. The lights were always left running. The bathroom was always busy, and it never felt quiet. I found myself longing for the silence I'd enjoyed before, and then the money started going in ways I told myself it wouldn't. Every week there was something new. Shoes, books, uniforms, projects, birthday, everything added up. None of it was huge on its own. The problem was it stacked up so much, and I realized I was now carrying the full weight of a family that I hadn't planned on carrying. I didn't say much about it because I wanted to keep the peace, and I told myself it was just part of the life I'd chosen. Inside, I was starting to feel the pressure. She would tell me it was normal, that kids always needed things, and I agreed out loud. But in my head I was thinking, this isn't my problem. Yet I'd walked into it, and it was something so much bigger than I'd been prepared for. I tried my best to focus on the positives, and I got respect from things because of that. But this little bit of respect I thought I had wasn't actually anything close to what it should have been for what I'd done. Between the $75,000 for the house, the $50,000 for the loan, I was sitting in a new house though. with half my savings gone. 4 kids who looked at me for everything, and a future that was starting to feel far less secure than I ever imagined when I stepped off the plane. Not long after we moved into the house, I did decide to buy a car. It felt like it was necessary because out in the province, it was very difficult to use any form of transport to go anywhere. $25,000 for a second-hand SUV. I had to. It needed to be big enough for the whole family. Again, I had to tell myself it was an investment and it would make life easier. It did. It did mean we could go to town when we wanted, take the kids to school without hassle, and go to Manila if we needed it. But there was also another huge chunk gone from what I had left. And when I added it all up, I'd spent $70,000 on the house, $50,000 on the loan, and now $25,000 on the car. $150,000 in total, which meant I was down to $100 in savings. I do remember sitting and working it out on paper, and it did seem manageable. $300 a month from the loan repayments that her uncle's son promised to send could be counted as an income. And if I kept our spending to around $700 a month on top of that, the money should stretch for years. In my head, I figured that gave me plenty of time to settle in, maybe find something more stable to do later on, and that thought calmed me down. But that was only the theory, and the reality was so different. The $300 a month never came. It was promised, and 2 small payments did show up at the start, but then nothing. And on top of that, we were spending closer to $1,500 a month without even trying. It wasn't like I was going out and buying luxuries. It was just that there was always something. School fees, repairs, hospitals, everything that you could think of. And it just kept adding up. And the problem is I kept handing it over. I could see the money going down faster than I'd ever imagined, but I had to keep telling myself it would work out. That maybe the repayments would start again. That maybe next month I would get control of the spending. But deep down, the slope was too steep. I could feel my savings going away. I didn't want them to. But no matter what I thought or wanted, it was just like it was automatic. Instead of feeling secure, I was starting to panic about how long the money would really last. It didn't last much longer. And when I look back now, I try to understand why I carried on even after finding out she wasn't 23 at all, but 38. The only answer I can give myself is that I told myself it wasn't such a bad thing. In some ways, I even thought it made more sense. I wasn't a young man, and maybe being closer in age was better than having such a big gap between us. She was still attractive to me. She gave me attention and affection that I hadn't felt for ages. And I didn't want to admit I'd been fooled, I think, because that would have meant walking away from the dream I'd already started to build. I convinced myself that what mattered was the way she treated me in those early days. She smiled and talked about our future together, so I ignored this lie. I pushed it to the side and let things move forward. And we even talked about marriage, and I agreed, although we didn't get married, because it did feel like the natural next step after everything I'd already committed to. But slowly things changed, the affection dropped away, and in place came more demands and pressure, and a way of speaking to me that made me feel like I was failing, no matter how much I gave. I started to hate the tone she used. I started to hate the feelings that nothing was ever enough. I had once loved the way she made me feel wanted, but now I felt used. My savings just drained away. $75,000 on the house, $25,000 on the car, $50,000 on the so-called loan, and thousands of more month by month on living costs that doubled what I had planned for. Until eventually, I was left with around $50,000 and nothing to show for it. I built a house in someone else's name and a family that was never mine. So I came home. I went back to the same kind of life I'd tried so hard to escape. Boring job that paid the bills, gave me no joy, and I carried on with nothing but regret. Regret for all that money that I'd lost, all the years I'd wasted saving that money, and for not believing I could actually do things myself if I wanted them to. That's the thing. If I'd just gone and lived there and not bothered with trying to have someone, I'd still be there.